What's up, YouTube? Eugene here. Or am I? Well, that's my name. But does that define me? It shouldn't, because it's just a sound that comes out of somebody's mouth and something that I've identified with my whole life. But no, it doesn't really define me, because it doesn't make me the person that I am, along with a lot of other beliefs that I've held about myself that I've picked up through conversations, through judgments, through people's body language, through observation, through the behavior of other people, none of which define me as well. So today I want to talk about my introspection, how I lost myself in my addiction to perfume, and how I've also been able to find my self-awakening because of perfume. So I hope you'll stick around and share with us. But I went 6 weeks without purchasing any perfume. This was done on purpose. It's my second 6-week purchase list stint. Both came this year, and it was both really to just to watch my patterns, watch my behaviors, and see what makes me tick, what triggers me, and just what drives Eugene or his ego. But anyway, the last thing I purchased, this is Le Labo's Another 13 on 10/12/20. So October 12th, 2020, they label all their purchasing dates. And that was followed up by Gucci's Hortus Sanitatis, which I've done an unboxing. And I love both of these perfumes. I've since picked up a few other things, but there was a 6-week spread in between. And that's what I want to talk about. What have I learned about myself in the past 6 weeks? But y'all know in the last year, last 14 months, I've had a dark night of the soul experience. If you're not familiar with the dark night of the soul, it's a Catholic terminology that references to an awakening. And you don't need to be Catholic. You don't need to be religious or follow any kind of a religion to experience the dark night of the soul. It's basically an ego shedding, getting rid of all the misbeliefs you have about yourself, realizing none of that stuff is really true, ego attachment, basically that kind of thing. And my dark night of the soul came at my rock bottom after my relationship fell apart. And even though as ugly as that sounds, that separation came from a loving place. There was not ever any drama or chaos. This person is still a huge influence on my life, and one of my biggest supporters. And the relationship has never been better, to be totally honest. So it came from a loving place, and we're both very supportive of each other. And they will remain a soulmate for me for the rest of my life, regardless of our status. So that feels good. That definitely feels good, knowing that I have somebody there to support me. But the biggest thing that I learned in the 6 weeks is how I have been abandoned myself my whole life. And that's something that came from childhood, the way I was subconsciously taught to process my thoughts and feelings. So I've always suffocated my emotions. I was what you would consider emotionally unaware, emotionally unavailable, almost challenging, challenged, for God's sakes. Things would happen around me and I would just be totally oblivious to them. And even though my body felt it, I distracted myself, and all I wanted to do was feel good, and I wanted to feel better, and I wanted to avoid pain and suffering. So my addiction came from a place of not what I'm running to, perfume, what makes me feel better, perfume, but more of what am I running from? What is it that's bothering me? What is it that's making me uncomfortable? And how painful was it to sit in my discomfort? And this is really what I have learned the most in My 6 weeks off from purchasing is watching these triggers and how they come about, and through meditation. Meditation has taught me a lot about myself, just sitting alone, sitting in discomfort with no distractions, no devices, just me, myself, and I. You notice how I said that? Me, myself, and I. That's ego, and I don't know, probably body or spirit, but mind, body, spirit. They're all kind of connected, but they're not always working in unison. And mine definitely weren't. I wasn't, my mind and body weren't, definitely not working together. They were almost working against each other, and that's what I was taught, through subconsciously, is to avoid my emotions, like most boys are. Socially, we are taught, not to cry, to be tough. Only girls cry, or you're considered a wuss or a pussy, or less of a man than, which are all misbeliefs. None of these are really true. These are just more ego attachments. But through my 6-week introspection, I really noticed a lot of things coming up for me, especially emotionally, and how uncomfortable they made me. And the process would go something like, I'd be sitting at work and I would get the thought, I need to buy perfume. Okay, well, these thoughts would be coming up a lot. And I would ask myself, where are these thoughts coming from? How is this thought coming in my head? Because I'm sitting here working, and all of a sudden this thought of purchasing a perfume would come up. And I noticed, the thought would be a reaction to an emotion. And the emotion would come in the pit of my gut, and it would be really uncomfortable, and it would be dark, and it would feel dark, and it would feel, the pit of my gut would start to get warm and uncomfortable, and it's like kind of creepy too, almost like walking through a spider's web, or a nest of spider webs. So it made me really uncomfortable, and instead of looking at that discomfort, I would say, subconsciously, the way I was programmed, I would say, okay, this is how the ego works. The ego is a self-defense mechanism, among a ton of other things. The ego would say, all right, alert, there's an intruder down there. Let's protect you from it so we don't need to suffer the pain. Whatever, the past traumas that are coming up. Something would trigger this emotion, and I would get that emotion in the pit of my gut. It would react, and my response would be, all right, let's not look there. Let's soothe this somehow. We don't have a pacifier anymore. We're now 45 years old. We don't have a pacifier. How are we going to soothe this? And it would be, my default would be, let's go buy perfume. And I can totally see how people with a bigger trauma would be like, all right, perfume's not enough to soothe this. Let's hit some drugs. Let's get some alcohol. Let's go gambling. Let's get some woman. Whatever the default is, I'm not sure. I've heard people say that they've replaced drugs and alcohol with perfume. So it's not the device. It's the behavior. It's the behavior behind. It's the behavior behind the emotion that's driving this. So the default is not really what it is. But I also found, through my time, I would be trying to validate a lot of these. And, I would feel that emotion, and I'd be like, I need to buy perfume. Well, how am I going to validate it? Well, because I'm worth it. I deserve it. I would start making up excuses. Maybe my partner bought a $200 blouse, so maybe now I can go and buy it. I got the right to buy a $200 perfume because I deserve it. And if she can spend money, I can go spend money. And that's just all stemming from the ego. The ego's pretty messy. The ego's really, it's the narrative in your mind. It's that voice that's constantly talking to you. It's constantly validating you. It's defending you. It's the ego is the beliefs that you hold. and it just really wants you to feel good. It just wants to soothe you. And you can see, you know, in a lot of the older cartoons, I don't know if they still have that, but they'd have the angel on one shoulder and the devil on one shoulder. And now that I'm looking back in retrospect, I can see like the devil is the ego and the angel is consciousness, because consciousness is, it offsets the ego. So that's really, you know, what was driving me, is I kept abandoning myself. I kept abandoning those painful emotions, and I wanted to soothe with perfume. Perfume was my go-to. That's what made me feel. It made me feel better always. I feel fortunate enough that it was just perfume and it wasn't something worse. You know, addiction, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It's you know, it can be a good thing. For me, because of my addiction, it was a lesson. It was like, what is my addiction trying to tell me? And you know, it took 45 years, but I finally discovered that subconsciously it's just a reaction to painful traumas that I didn't want to look into. And it's no different than, you know, having all this dirt in your house and kind of just sweeping it under the rug. Every week you're sweeping this garbage under the rug and never really looking at what's under there. And then after 40 years, you pick up that rug and you're like, holy crap, like how do I deal with this? So it's very similar to that in that respect, but it definitely can cause a lot of pain, as it did for me. But like I said, it's what is the lesson that the addiction is trying to teach you. There's this fable that I heard from one of my healers that I love. I love this fable so much. There's just so much meaning to it. And if I can remember it correctly, it goes something like, there was a farmer that lived with his son, and one day his horse ran away. The neighbors came over and they're like, hey, we heard your horse ran away. We're so sorry. That's so unlucky. And the farmer's like, unlucky? Okay. Yeah, maybe you're right. It could be unlucky, but maybe not. Who knows? And the neighbor's like, that's strange. A couple days later, the horse came back with 2 other wild horses. So he brought 2 friends over, 2 horse friends. And the neighbors heard about this and they came over and they're like, hey, we heard about your horse and bringing back 2 other horses. You're so lucky. And the farmer said, lucky? Maybe. Yeah, maybe I'm lucky. Maybe I'm not. A short while, and the neighbors were kind of confused. They're like, what is this guy talking about? And, you know, a short while after, one of the wild horses had kicked the son in the leg and broke his leg, shattered his leg. Son ended up in the hospital in the cast for weeks. And the neighbors heard about that and they came running over and they're like, oh, we heard about your son. We're so sorry about your son. That's so unlucky. And the farmer said, unlucky? Maybe it's unlucky, but maybe it's not. Who knows? A short while later, war started and people were coming over looking to draft young men to go fight in the war. But this man's son was in the hospital with his leg up in a sling, and he wasn't eligible. So the neighbors heard about that, and they came over, and they said, oh, we heard about your son not being able to go to the war. He's so lucky. And the farmer said, lucky? Maybe, but maybe not. So, you see, not everything needs to be good or bad. It's what is the lesson at the end of the day? What is this story trying to tell you? And for me, it's just been do the deep dive, get to know who you really are. Don't be short-sighted. And as much as it may have ruined my relationship, you know, at that time, is that unlucky? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but we got lots of time to find out. So there you go. Lost myself in perfume, found myself in perfume. Lots of ups and downs. If you're struggling, know that, you know, it doesn't need to be judged. It's not good or bad. Try and take the lesson out of this, because there can be some beautiful things to be found. Anyway, let me know your comments. Let me hear your experiences, any feedback for me, any advice, any recommendation. Addiction is, it can be an ugly thing. It doesn't have to be. Maybe it is, you know, maybe it isn't. Don't be so quick to judge. Please like this video, helps with the algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe. For those of you that need to hear this, you are loved, you are worthy, and you are perfect just the way you are. Thanks for watching, and we will see you again soon.